Okay, let's just dive right into this. You know that feeling when you step out onto a bustling city street and instantly you're hit with this massive wave of exhaustion? Yeah, you are absolutely not alone in that. In this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why navigating a modern metropolis so often feels like a relentless barrage of artificial stimuli that just totally fries your nervous system. We're looking at a huge mismatch here, the fundamental clash between human biology and modern city design. We call it the glitch of modernity. And more importantly, we're going to look at how we can actually heal it by rediscovering a totally ancient code.
Just think about your morning commute for a second. The blaring horns, the towering sheer walls of glass closing in on you, the throngs of people just rushing past. Why does your own city feel like an active threat? Why does it breed this inescapable sense of claustrophobia, of burnout, of hypervigilance? Well, it's because your brain is constantly scanning, processing, and reacting to an environment that literally never sleeps, never softens, and honestly, never gives you a single moment of genuine biological peace.
And listen, this isn't just some fleeting individual feeling. The numbers behind this are seriously staggering. Right now, more than 55% of the global population resides in environments that our brains literally perceive as a permanent, inescapable threat signal. I mean, just think about that. That is a massive majority of humanity living in a state of perpetual low-grade biological alarm, simply because of the spaces we've chosen to build around ourselves.
So, the really crucial takeaway here is that if you're feeling this anxiety, it is definitely not a personal failing. It is a highly documented clinical reality known as urban stress syndrome. It is directly caused by the architectural rigidity of our modern environment actively breaking down our internal stress regulation mechanisms. We are talking about things like elevated baseline cortisol levels, chronic cognitive fatigue, and perhaps worst of all, the progressive erosion of social trust between neighbors.
The actual scale of this impact is, frankly, terrifying. Recent data reveals that in some urban provinces, symptoms of severe mental distress have literally doubled in less than a decade. We are looking at regions where nearly 46% of inhabitants are exhibiting signs of psychological collapse. The places we live are quite literally pushing our cognitive limits to the absolute breaking point.
Section 1. The Behavioral Sink, the Psychology of High-Rises.
To really understand exactly how we got here, we have to look at some fascinating, if slightly chilling, clinical science behind why our current obsession with high-rise, hyperdense architecture creates such intense anxiety. We can actually trace this back to the famous rodent experiments conducted by John B. Calhoun. When populations were forced into high-density environments where unwanted social contact was basically unavoidable, a very specific, disastrous sequence occurred. The lack of clearly defined private territory, what urbanists call defensible space, combined with the total loss of neutral third places to gather naturally, led to massive sensory overload. It creates this stark, undeniable behavioral analogy to our modern vertical high-rises today. When you pack populations into sterile vertical density without organic breathing room, the whole system just collapses.
And this brilliantly illustrates the glitch of modernity compared to the code of antiquity. Modern architecture is totally obsessed with Euclidean geometry. We're talking harsh, straight lines, sharp triangles, and abstract shapes that literally do not exist anywhere in nature, which subconsciously feeds our unease. But ancient builders, they operated on a completely different code. They used natural fractals in mathematical proportions like the golden ratio. These forms actually trigger the parasympathetic relaxation response in your nervous system. They created a subconscious safe signal that prioritized human presence over sheer cold productivity.
Section 2. The Power of the Edge, the Biology of Borders.
This brings us to a really fascinating concept in spatial psychology called the edge effect. We actually have a hardwired biological preference to stay along the borders of a space, rather than standing totally exposed right in the middle. Think about it. When you are at the edge, your back is protected, and your personal territory becomes this easily manageable semicircle right in front of you. Now look at how we build today compared to the past. Modern cities are completely dominated by hard edges. Think of those massive, blank, windowless concrete walls. Those actually trigger a persistent freeze-or-flight response in your amygdala. They directly contribute to urban paranoia. Ancient cities, on the flip side, thrived on soft edges. Their building facades were filled with niches, porticos, and inviting gateways. They provided the psychological support that actually makes you want to stay and linger.
I want you to really think about the streets you walk down every single day. Does your neighborhood feel like a gray desert of hostile, blank walls, or does it feel like a safe signal of soft, inviting edges? Because this one architectural contrast Just how the edge of a public space is handled is usually the exact difference between a connected, vibrant community and just a lonely, isolated crowd.
Section 3. The Rhythm of Slowness, Pace and Perception.
Now, to truly heal this urban anxiety, we really need to talk about our pace. As we shift away from the frantic hypervigilance of the modern street, it's actually amazing to realize that human beings are, at our core, walking animals. We live in a world of cars zooming by at 100 kilometers per hour, but our entire sensory apparatus is finely adapted to horizontal movement at exactly 5 kilometers per hour. We are literally built to stroll. That is the exact, specific speed at which we best process our surroundings.
And ancient cities were masterfully built for this specific biological speed. They used really narrow storefronts and tons of doors, typically about 15 to 25 units every 100 meters, which basically guaranteed a high density of visual interest as you walked. Because you were moving slowly, your social field of vision remained perfectly intact. You could actually read facial expressions and perceive moods from 20 to 25 meters away, which naturally facilitates deep human contact. Modern, fast-paced automobile cities completely destroy this dynamic. When traffic speed increases, the architecture has to adapt by becoming coarse, loud, and utterly devoid of human detail.
We have built ourselves out of our own areas. Just let that powerful realization sit with you for a second. By engineering streets purely for the speed of cars, and by completely stripping away things like street-level benches, front yards, and porches that invite us to linger, we haven't just changed our architecture. We have systematically deleted the social capital that actually holds our societies together.
Section 4. Restorative Infrastructure, Building for Health.
But hey, there is incredibly good news here, and a very clear path forward. The ancient code we've been uncovering isn't just about what we aesthetically see, it is profoundly about what our bodies feel. And the great part is, we can absolutely build this back into our lives. Just look at the materials that surround us. Modern cities rely so heavily on synthetic materials like plastic, glass, and sharp artificial lighting. These things reflect noise, they create harsh glare, and they directly fuel nature deficit disorder, leading to heightened irritability. The ancient code, however, relied heavily on natural materials like stone, wood, and terracotta. These are inherently sound-absorbing, they age beautifully over time, and crucially, they connect our senses directly back to the evolutionary landscapes where our species first developed.
Let's look at how this impacts our cognitive health, because integrating natural elements into our cities is absolutely not just some nice aesthetic luxury, it is a biological necessity. Our brains rely heavily on directed attention, which is a highly limited cognitive resource that gets completely depleted by the constant jaded visual clutter of modern urban life. To actually recover, your prefrontal cortex specifically requires the soft fascination that only nature can provide.
And the data backs this up beautifully. Research shows that mere proximity to high-quality green spaces has actually been proven to reduce chronic stress by an incredible 25%. Think about that. A full quarter of your daily urban stress can be completely alleviated simply by giving your brain access to the restorative power of nature.
Section 5. The Architecture of Rootedness, Craving Continuity.
Beyond just nature, we also desperately require continuity. Human beings inherently crave a connection to the past. When we are surrounded by historical buildings, it provides this deep emotional stability that actively cures the psychological void created by endless, sterile, identical modern glass towers. Take this incredible example, the Jewish house in Lincoln, England. This single building has stood for over 800 years. But what's really vital here is that it isn't just some guarded museum trophy. It remains a fully functional part of daily street life. Historic places like this provide restorative qualities that are actually totally comparable to green spaces. They give us a profound sense of enduring stability that literally tells our nervous system, you are safe, things last, you belong to a continuous timeline.
The masters of the ancient code understood something incredibly profound. They weren't just building shelters from the rain, they were engineering peace. They understood instinctually what modern science and biometric data are only just now beginning to confirm about how the human brain actually works. And that brings us to a super exciting frontier of city building called Neuro-Urbanism. We are finally using advanced environmental sensing and biometric data to map exactly how architecture affects our heart rate, our cortisol levels, and even our brain waves. The future of city building is quite literally catching up to the wisdom of the past. We are learning how to design spaces that explicitly respect the human biological code, enclosing the mind in a way that actually frees the human spirit rather than crushing it.
So we are left with a fundamental decision. The environments we live in are not accidental. They are a direct result of our choices. Now that we understand the deep biological impact our surroundings have on us, the question is totally clear. Will we continue to choose the architecture of anxiety, or will we finally demand the code of peace? Think about how you want to shape your own space, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.